This is our monthly optional meeting for the President's Advisory Commission. And I will remind you that although we're recording it, that's only for your use. Nobody else sees these sessions except PAC members. We give you access to the full library. And if you've missed any of the previous ones, I urge you to go check them out, especially if there's a topic that's of particular interest to you. And we're always open for suggestions or requests. If there's a topic you feel like we can or should cover that you have an interest in, let us know, and we'll reach throughout our A&R system and find the right people to present something for you. So with that, let me not take up too much time and turn it over to Elizabeth Moon. Elizabeth just joined us. How long has it been now, Elizabeth? It's still not very long.
Year yet. I think it's 2 weeks shy of a year.
Just not quite a year. Okay. So Elizabeth has been with us almost a year. She is our first ever Director of Workplace Inclusion and Belonging. And I would imagine it's just now that she's probably wrapping her arms around A&R, because, you know, we are such well, we're not even that large compared to, say, like campuses, but very complex with county offices and research centers and 13, 14 statewide programs and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, and all the different research areas. So we've got quite an array of personnel from community educators through, you know, people that work in the field that are recs, project scientists. We do some work with students, grad students in particular, our academics, and then a bunch of staff. So I think Elizabeth's got her hands full, and I'm looking forward to seeing the update she's going to give all of us.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Glenda, for the introduction. Again, I'm Elizabeth Moon. I'm excited to be here. I've been in the UC system for just over 10 years now. Prior to coming to A&R, I was actually at the Graduate School of Management, working with students and faculty and staff in that space. I'm actually a longtime educator. Taught everything from pre-K past MBAs, and so excited to be here with A&R as they continue this journey that they've set for themselves. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, crossing fingers. So I'm assuming it looks good. All right, so today, Kathy and Glenda asked me to come and speak to you about critical and emerging issues and speaking specifically about equity, diversity, and inclusion within A&R. And so it's truly my honor and pleasure to come before you today to share about the issues in this space. As Glenda said, I joined almost a year ago, and really this position here, working with A&R, working with the people of A&R, has really reaffirmed for me the strength and impact that the University of California has on all the people within our state, but also the impact that can go wider than just our state. I have truly seen, you know, the intentionality and commitment to raising the bar in integrating equity, diversity, and inclusion throughout the organization. And it's truly been life-changing for me professionally, and I really appreciate that. So today I'm going to share with you the successes and continued commitment and challenges we collectively are a part of in fulfilling our mission to reach all Californians, and how we look at equity, diversity, inclusion, and how we're building that look throughout our work here. So these are some of our priorities and emerging issues. We're speaking about the strengthening of, you know, I guess when I first came in, you know, I thought about what is this house of A&R built on? And there's already a foundation here. But there are opportunities to strengthen those those connections between colleagues, connections with partners, connections with programming across A&R. There's also an opportunity here to look at shared language. creating that shared language. What does one mean by a certain words or certain concepts, and making sure that that's a shared understanding across all 58 counties and the people who work within those counties and in those offices. And then, of course, assessing policies and structures for equity and looking at how do we develop that equity lens when we approach different policies and structures that we either currently have or that we're looking to build out. So right here is kind of the landscape of equity, diversity, inclusion in A&R. And the first picture on the left is not very clear, and that's on purpose. I'm going to put that out there. It's on purpose because when I first entered A&R just about a year ago, I went on a deep dive into everything that's happening in this space. And this picture just kind of illustrates on the left-hand side the tremendous amount of work that is occurring across the organization, both on the research side, the people-to-people side, the programming side, the structures and policy side, and it's everywhere, and it's all there, and it's all in different buckets. And that is incredible because that shows continuous commitment. It also shows an opportunity for us to kind of bring it together. It gives us the opportunity of how do we connect all of these incredible things that are happening so that these are shared among each other. So we can find the alignment and the synergies to help each other strengthen and enhance our work in this space. I also wanted to bring about a conversation about things that have already been created prior to me joining A&R. We have the Diversity, Equity, Inclusion Advisory Council. These are 13 individuals who have committed to providing recommendations and insight to senior leadership, specifically Glenda, in addressing issues that may be happening within the organization. And one thing that they've done beyond just developing their charter 2 years ago, they also were instrumental working directly with HR to build out processes to mitigate bias in hiring. And so it's been an incredible journey for them, an incredible journey as they continue to move forward. We also have our program teams that focus on DEI and justice. And under the program teams, there are work groups. Specifically, there's there's work groups looking at college readiness. There's work groups that are focusing on Native American partnerships. There are work groups who are looking at a lot of different assets and facets of the work that's being done in the field directly with community members. And this is where some of those impact challenges, impact reports that you may see happening. Like there was one research that was done at elderberries. There's other work that's being done within some of the state programs where they're actually utilizing some of the research they do in their work groups to bring that perspective to the work that they do in those programs. We also have the great opportunity here of having 4 different employee resource groups or affinity groups, as well as a DEI alliance. Our Black and Allied Employees, ERG, actually, comes together, and actually on February 28th, they'll be having their own Black History Month conversation and dialogue from 10 to 12. I don't have the link on me right here, but I'm sure we can find it to share out with you. They've done an incredible work bringing the voices of those who work in ag and natural resources to the forefront for us to learn and continue to grow our knowledge in this space. We also have the Latinx and Friends Affinity Group that, was under the leadership of quite a number of our colleagues who actually go on the field. I think back in September when we had Hispanic Heritage Month, we were able to learn about the agave plants and how those agave plants, really make having an impact economically, especially with climate, changes happening. And so that was really interesting. We have our LGBTQ+ affinity group, our People of Color affinity group, And then I really want to give a special shout out to our DEI Alliance. This is a grassroots organization that started in 2018, and they really were kind of the foundation and impetus to my position, to the DEI Advisory Council being started. And I just want to give a shout out that they continue to collaborate and bring ideas forth and continue to work with all of A&R. One other thing I'd like to share is, out of all of this, we also just finished about an hour ago something that has been happening way before I came on board as well, and that was the senior leadership team's diversity, equity, inclusion monthly conversations, where different individuals on the senior leadership team bring learning to us, and we have opportunities to have open and transparent conversations with each other to build our learning and connect with each other. All of these things that we have at this organizational level. You know, I really wanted to think about, how do we strategically create a response to this? What is the process for looking at this? So one of the pieces that I brought to the table was supporting the DEI Advisory Council, providing them some thought leadership, some guidance, some ability to collaborate on the different areas that they felt we should be looking at and start researching to bring forth recommendations and proposals. We also just recently completed, on February 1st, we had our inaugural EDI Summit. This was practically a two-day event where we brought in and celebrated all of the ERG leaders, all of the members within our community that have been working really, really hard in this space of equity, diversity, and inclusion, and brought them all together as a celebration of the work that they've done, but also as thought partners as we start to think of and build out who we are as an organization and how can we continue to keep the momentum moving, to make the changes to collaborate and integrate this thoughts of how to develop that equity, diversity, and inclusion lens, both internally within the organization, but also how that may eventually spread out externally to those that we work with. Coming from that is one also piece is our principles of community, which I will show in just a moment, but our principles of community were originally developed in 2016. They create an incredible foundation for our organization about how we should be interacting. You know, it gives us a guideline, a way of who we are. It epitomizes our values and our behaviors in those values. And as any good document, it's a living document. And so as we've come into this next phase, you know, this living document needs a little bit of a 2.0 to really help all of our newest colleagues, because we brought on a lot of new colleagues, to help all of the new colleagues also integrate into these behaviors and values that we have here at A&R. Of course, there's continuously review of current and in-process policies and structures that are happening within the organization. And as I mentioned before, collaborating across the organization. I feel like my position, although not fully defined as of yet, because we're only a year into this, I feel like it is about spreading across the entire organization and figuring out ways to collaborate and build those lenses for that EDI perspective. Back in October, I had the honor of attending the Master Gardeners Conference. In person, I believe, was the first time in a long time because of COVID, and working directly with our master gardeners on how they approach different projects. What kinds of questions could they be asking themselves? You know, who in their community are underserved? Who has not actually had the benefit of the master gardeners working with them? How do we go about making sure that we can bring all of those community members into the conversation? And so that was truly like a highlight of my fall this past year. As I mentioned, our UCA&R principles of community, this is the nugget in the middle of what we believe. And I have worked extensively with about 20 or 30 county offices to take these incredible foundational ideas and think about how can we operationalize these in real life, both on a team level, but also as interconnected between all the counties and the main offices of A&R. And maybe if there are ways to refresh the wording so that it's more impactful, easier to remember, so that we can all remember that these are our values. And if you look at these principles of community, it's about communication. Like anything that we do in life, communication is number one. How do we continue to have those open, honest conversations and communications, making sure that our words are ones of inclusion and respect, that we are able to utilize this in a way to collaborate and work together to honor the lived experiences and of others within our whole California communities. So valuing those lived experiences, valuing that knowledge that we have within A&R, but also with our partners and others across California. Celebrating all of ourselves, celebrating the differences and the diversity of California. Creating this emotional safety and sense of belonging, that we are all here together to fulfill this incredible mission that we have at A&R. Making sure that we do this with ethics and integrity. And what does ethics and integrity mean? What does that look like in our different experiences within A&R, the work that we do within A&R, whether that's support work or whether that's in the field client work? How do we show our investment in all of our members, not just investments in salary, which of course everyone would love, continuous salary investment, but invest in ways that helps individuals grow so that they can continue to give even more to those that they support. And showing recognition to all the members, making sure that we understand that what each of us does, whether it's from answering the phone to working in the field with students or clients, that each of us is important to our organization continuing to make the impacts that we continue to make throughout the organization. Here, I wanted to kind of highlight our Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion Summit. As you can see from these pictures, we have all of these thought partners in the room. These are staff and academics and leadership who committed the time to looking at all the wins that we had. We actually, in the middle, you see here, one of our academics, Esther Masase, who's also on our DEI Advisory Council, putting up some wins that we've had throughout the time. We created a timeline that we'll be sharing out, within the next couple, soonish, within the springtime. But we created a timeline of all the areas where we had huge wins, where we've actually put into play these principles of community, our commitment to equity, diversity, and inclusion. You see also folks having those shared laughters and experiences together. For many people, even the DEI Advisory Council, this was the first time that they've ever met in person. Most people had never met each other in person, even if they're a part of the same employee resource group. And so having this time together to connect as people, work together on, what are our challenges? What are some priorities that we want to look at? How do we help to, shape those as we move forward? How do we help to build those connections and that communication across the organization? This is where this EDI summit really shined in that ability. And people have been emailing about just what an incredible opportunity that was, from how they are energized by that experience, and that they were able to make new partners and new collaborators to look at the work that they're doing across A&R and bring this forth to others. So this is where we hit those opportunities and challenges. This is ongoing work. Nothing is ever one and done. There's no checklist that can ever be fully accomplished, because it's really about the fabric of the organization. It's really about, we can do these things, but how do we continue to operationalize them? How do we continue to weave this into the fabric of who we are? And how do we continue to actually go beyond the knowledge to the accountability piece? I liken it to taking a class. I can take a finance class, and I can put all those numbers into the little boxes on Excel, and I can maybe even pass the class for that moment. But can I do that work 3 months down the line? Can I do that work with a new view? Can I constantly see changes and adaptations that I could utilize in the moment? It's really about that putting into practice, sharing the accountability, that steadfast accountability and leadership for this work to continue. And so some of the opportunities and challenges we have, we were gifted $100,000 from President Drake, not really gifted, but we were provided $100,000 from President Drake to work on addressing bias and bigotry across the organization. And we do have, some part of that proposal that was sent in and accepted does have a lot of different pieces to it. It has a mental health component. It has an education component and a professional development component that we're going to be looking at in terms of a larger strategy for doing this work. We have a lot of recommendations from the summit that we're still compiling and putting together and trying to put it into a form that's digestible by more than just myself and others within the small group that are working on that. We're really looking at strengthening our employee affinity groups. How can we strengthen the work that they do to build those connections within, but also to provide those opportunities to continue to grow? And so it's really, truly just an opportunity of strengthening those bonds, enabling them to also to utilize their affinity groups to really press forward with the mission of the organization as well. And then, of course, solidifying an integrated approach. This next year, I see myself as continuing to bring together and figure out that interconnectedness between each and every group and solidify an integrated approach across the organization. And so with that, I'm going to open it up to questions.
Thank you, Elizabeth. That was great. So here's our time to have some discussion, questions, thoughts, ideas. Mark.
Hey, thanks for sharing that, and congrats on your work there. I'm over in the School of Vet Med, and we are working aggressively to develop new outreach programs that include summer camps for middle school and high school and undergraduates that would get them excited about going to college and looking at careers in health and veterinary medicine. One of the things that I think you're really able to do in A&R is have this kind of statewide global outreach that that connects in many ways to families and to communities that is really hard when we're stuck up here in Davis. So if you have any ideas or think about, we've talked about 4-H, we've talked about other ways that we might develop deep connections that allow people throughout the state to know about these summer camps, or to just think about ways we could do a better job of recruiting and enhancing our applicant pool to be more diverse. So just want to throw that out there since I've got the opportunity.
Awesome. Thank you, Mark. And I'd be happy to collaborate and be a thought partner and hopefully gain a thought partner with the person I know in your organization who's working in that space as well.
Great. Well, I will do some connecting. Monet Roberts is our Chief Diversity Officer. She's just, it's a new position for the school, just started about a year ago, and she's going to help us with a lot of our new outreach programs, including these new camps. So I'll connect you two, and thanks again for your work.
Thank you. Sharon, you have your hand raised.
Good afternoon. I really glad I was able to join you this afternoon. I don't know, my computer ate my link, so I couldn't find it. Thank you for sending it out. What a first year, huh? You trying to cover a very, very broad waterfront. You mentioned just any number of things, and one of the things I wanted to follow up on is you talked about attending the Master Gardener conference and talking to them about how do they see their broadening their connections within the community. Could you share a couple thoughts of what came out of that experience? I think the Master Gardener program has an incredible potential of reaching into particularly urban areas and making a very real connection back to the ANR program.
Yes, Sharon, what a great question. And I'm so glad I get to expand upon that. So in the room that I was in giving my workshop, there was about 40 or 50 master gardeners who had come together for that session. And they were from all across California. And one of the pieces of knowledge that came out of that was how can they think about engaging folks? I mean, as something as simple as timeline. When do you do something? And I know that seems very simplistic, right? It seems really simplistic. When do you do something? But in actuality, it's a really huge piece, right? Because, traditionally, typically, our master gardeners tend to be on the retired side, right? So they tend to love to do things weekdays between 10 and 12 or 10 and 2, right? So having these conversations about, well, can we shift a time? Is there different times to do something? Instead of people coming to you, maybe there's a transportation issue, right? Is there a way to go to them, right? And it's really those little pieces that start to make the changes and the differences. It's about building a garden within, like in the urban areas, someone, was talking about how they've just thought about building a garden within this cityscape, right? And so that people were able to easily walk and take transportation to participate in building that. And then another person's like, oh, that would be great if we worked with the people who are unhoused to come into that community as well. And then they would also have access to fresh fruits and vegetables in an area where, food scarcity is pretty high, where you don't have that access to fresh fruits and vegetables. And so really it was about rethinking just small pieces that came out of it for them, and that to continue those conversations.
I'm not shy. I'll just keep asking questions.
Please do.
All right. Thank you. Thank you. When you talked about the EDI summit and coming together and having this broad celebration and recognition of people who have been quietly contributing, over a period of time. What came out of that? What's next? What do you see those leaders wanting to take on now that they've seen each other, they've had these conversations? What's next for them? I know you talked about the money from President Drake, but as you and I have had conversations, money is, we throw money at stuff, and money is not always the issue.
Exactly.
Right? There are so many other things that can be done over and above money that start with that common recognition, that coming together, those communications. So with that in mind, what do you see coming as a result of that EDI summit?
There's a couple of things that I see as coming out of it, and we're still collating a lot of the data that came from it. So because I wasn't part of every small conversation, but they did collate a lot of that information that's coming out of it. But I see one piece was like today, for the first time, leaders of the ERGs came together to talk about how to market their affinity groups to new and current employees. And I think this is the first time they've ever had the thought of coming together to even talk about that, right? It was just kind of something that was on a website somewhere, but now there's conversations about, okay, we're going to build a video. How are we going to build a video? What kind of collateral, like marketing collateral, both something you can hold in your hand, to something that's online. And so that interconnectedness, that intersectionality of individuals coming together to figure out how do we continue to build that. The affinity groups have also mentioned that they have interest in, maybe because we are a smaller organization, right? So we might not have the broad numbers that you might see in larger organizations. How can they start integrating and maybe doing some collaboration with the UCOP, the Office of the President's affinity and employee resource groups, and gaining knowledge from there as well, right? Because they see this as an opportunity to not just bring their voices and their perspectives to the table, which is huge, but also as a way to help other members within their group to grow themselves professionally. Having someone who maybe is a blank assistant 3 gain leadership or marketing, experience within their group, and then utilizing that to continue to build connections to leaders, to mentors, and helping them to build their ability to grow in their profession. So that's one thing that I see that we're going to continuously start working on to build that strength in the ERGs. I think the other piece that I feel really strongly about is really coming up prior to myself coming on board, and just based on conversations, this may not be a full perfect view. This may not be the view that's held by others, but this was the view I had coming in. There's a lot of different people and different groups trying to do a lot of different things, right? And they're all doing it, but there was no way that it was rising to the top, right? It was like, I put in 500 hours, but it goes nowhere, right? So that frustration level's there. And so one of the things that we had during this session was not only looking at the wins, but the challenges, and then thinking about what are the buckets as those challenges fall into, right? And what priorities can we agree to maybe be focusing on? So that instead of us trying to do 100 things in 1 year from 100 different groups and perspectives, what are 1 to 3 things that we as a whole group can focus on from our own different perspectives to start building out, so that there is actual movement, and maybe cut down on some of that frustration that things are not happening fast enough.
Did they identify what those priorities are, Elizabeth, or are you still putting that all together?
We're still putting it all together. We have about, I think it was about 30 flip charts worth of information that we're still putting together. So that's being worked on right now. But hopefully my goal is to put together a report of the summit, and have it for all of the leadership as well as the council here.
I'll add to that we've been doing an A&R at work survey for almost 6 years now. We contract with a group at UC San Diego, and I'm not even going to try to remember their name, Tritalotics or something like that.
Tritonlytics.
I was close. we contract with them, and they do this really massive survey of all of our employees, and we get a pretty decent response rate. And we've been using that for several years now to really target a lot of things, identifying where our employees are frustrated or have ideas or want to see more, this, that, or the other. And I think it's critically important we do this. First of all, it's just the right thing to do. But from just a purely business point of view, it costs a fortune if you're constantly having to recruit employees rather than retain the ones you have. And not only retain them, but also make sure one of the things we're really looking at is what is the training and professional development opportunities they want, which I think really fits into, their job satisfaction. And frankly, I feel like if our employees are more satisfied when they interact with the public, with our constituencies, they're going to be more satisfied.
Absolutely. And I think the A&R at Work survey, and I apologize for not mentioning it, but yes, I feel like that A&R at Work survey is kind of like that baseline data that we have an incredible wealth of information there that can also be utilized as we look at, across the organization, what that looks like. And I have to say, from the research I've done in the past and continuously do, retention is not mostly based on money. It's based on, is my voice valued? Is my voice valued, and am I recognized for the work that I do, even if it's not directly related to the job description? And so that value and recognition are like two of the most important pieces, as well as the opportunity to develop professionally, which is why I think our affinity groups have such an opportunity to kind of build that into what they do as well.
Okay, I'll keep going.
Sharon, we're perfectly happy to have you. Keep going. Other people can put their hand up.
Absolutely. And who knows, I may be touching on things that folks are thinking of. I was interested, you were just talking about the employee survey that has been going on for the last 6 years. And then we've also been working on 2040 plan and the survey that was done to support that. Have you looked at have you compared the response rates of the two? The response rates of the diverse members of your workforce, and compared that to the response rate that you had in the 2040 plan? Because I know we talked about looking at the impact of the response rate on, the 68, 64 items that we had included there. And I'm just wondering how the two response rates compare. Are they the same? Are they more? What has been the, over time, the response rate on the employee survey as represented by your diverse employees? Again, a part of the process is engagement. And if there are tools that are being supported by senior leadership to try to get at this, but you're not getting the response rates, there are questions that perhaps need to be asked as to why. What is keeping, why aren't you getting the rates from the levels of participation from those who are in the workforce currently that can really contribute to moving these endeavors forward?
It's a great question, Sharon. I'm going to defer to Glenda.
Well, I can say we have not done that particular analysis. That's an intriguing idea. I don't think it occurred to us because it's such different, audiences we sent the surveys out to. The one just goes to our employees, and it goes to all of them, staff and academic. It goes to all of them. And when we get the results back, we're able to parse it and slice it and dice it by a variety of factors. Whereas the survey to help us develop Vision 2040 went out to over 3,000 people, all of our people, but also a lot of external stakeholders and partners. So yeah, very, very different audiences, but yeah, that might be interesting to see at least what the return rates were of staff in one versus the other.
Right, and that's really what I'm asking, because I think that that in order for you to receive the information that you need to make have meaningful change,
Mhm.
that will only happen when you can hear from folks.
Yeah,
And folks will, in my experience, will do that when they believe, A, that they'll be heard, B, that there's going to be change, and C, that that it will become a long-term gig, not something that is going to die on the vine at the end of the fiscal year. So I'm wondering. Clearly, you have a number of individuals who have who this is part of who they are, and they are, and they have invested time and energy in the employee resource groups, on the councils. But there are others.
Mhm.
There are others out there. And
Absolutely.
what are the things that are going to be necessary to be done to get them to see that they are of value, that what's going on in their experience, that they don't have to sacrifice who they are in order to scratch, as Elizabeth and I have talked about, the professional itch of having a job, because
Mhm.
sometimes it is easier just to tamp down all those other things because I want this job, I want this promotion, I want to work in this place. So I'm just going to kind of shut down all those other aspects of who I am. And
Well, yeah, because you're kind of getting near defining quiet quitting, I think is the current term, right? And we don't need that in our folks, because
right,
it's one thing if you're quiet quitting in an office with each other, and yeah, it annoys your team. That's horrible.
correct.
But when it's involving the public,
Yep,
that's a whole different situation.
correct.
And that kind of stuff can blow up very quickly.
Yeah, because all it takes is something to ignite in the community. And then for it to find fodder within the workplace just starts a backfire that is very hard to get ahead of.
Yeah. No, you're absolutely correct.
If others don't have questions, I do have a couple of questions for this council to see.
I have
Sure.
one. I'm sorry for interrupting.
No.
I'm on the phone driving, so I can't raise my hand or anything. I really keenly listening to what everybody's saying, and I can't see any pictures or anything, but what I'm hearing is that, we really have a problem figuring out or getting out of the way the obstacles that people are having to involvement. And also earlier on, I really heard that, our leadership really needs to be about empowering the people that are in there doing the work, and possibly even stepping out of the way and focusing on supporting their endeavors and their efforts. And you can tell me if I'm wrong, but I'll leave it at that.
So I think, Luana, what I heard you say is that that were challenged in the area of empowering folks within the organization. And I think there's always, I think in an organization like A&R, just from my perspective and only being here less than a year, this physicality of where we exist, we're not all in one place. We're not all experiencing the same day to day because of the different places that we exist. And, that is one of the challenges of how do you make that connection? How do you create that shared community when the communities may be so different where you are? And I do want to say that in my experience, leadership definitely has made the commitment and intentionality towards trying to overcome some of that. But it is a continuous process, and that we do need to continue to find ways to make that connection with folks throughout the organization. I don't know if Glenda or Kathy, if you have anything else you'd like to add to that.
No, I think you summed it up well. I mean, I like to think we've been doing our best to make that commitment very clear. I mean, we went through a very widespread discussion of all of our system, our A&R system, our people, throughout 2015 and 2016, when we put together the principles of community. And that was one of the first, I started August of 2015. It was one of the first things that I pushed here, because, I knew we needed to do it. And partially I knew that because one of the reasons I came to this job in the first place is working with cooperative extension for the previous 20 years. I knew there was a lot of angst in the system. And it was a lot of angst for a lot of different reasons, not the least of which was 20 years of declining budgets. When every year you're having to cut program and you can't replace people, that's stressful. That alone was huge. But it was also just a lot of changes going on in the community and what was expected of our people, and new technologies and new ways of doing business. And we were trying to be more business-like with our administrative functions and, business process reengineering. That change, people hate change. Even if it's good change in the long run, people hate change. And so as we were going through all this change, I just thought it was really important that we have those principles of community and try to respect each other and value each other, even if we disagreed. And gosh knows, there's been plenty of disagreements this last several years, but I like to think we've mostly gotten by them in a pretty healthy way. Did that answer the question? I don't know.
I had a question, I think.
I agree.
Liz, can you all hear me? I keep dropping off, my internet keeps
We
crashing.
can hear you. We can hear you.
Good. I had a question. So we have a lot of people on this call from various organizations, backgrounds. I wonder if you've had anybody has had any success, best practices, things, A&R, the challenges that we face, the things that Elizabeth has talked about. Is there anything, any advice or suggestions or best practices that you think could benefit us, especially as we serve California and all of your communities? I know this is a tough topic, and I don't think there's a magic wand for any of this, but I'm just curious if anyone has ideas. Maybe it's late on a Friday afternoon and
Or even just resources that you think would be a great place for us to start to look into.
Yeah. And if you don't come up with it off the top of your head right now, don't hesitate to holler at us later, because I know oftentimes these kind of discussions, I have my really brilliant thoughts when I'm driving home or A day or two later, when I'm taking a shower or something like that, it's like, oh my gosh, why didn't I say such and such? So we're always happy to hear whatever such and such is. Jackie, you're muted if you're saying something.
Well, I'm thinking about saying something. You know, in the world that I inhabit, and I thank you all for the questions and the comments, because I am sitting here thinking and trying to process and digest this. For in the world that I inhabit, there is no unanimity around the value around EDI. There is no consensus. There are no shared values around that, and that makes openness and dialogue and any sort of progress in any direction impossible. So it's so refreshing to hear how engaged ANR is, how engaged other aspects of the UC system are in this effort. I think that when you get to the point where this is really just an integrated part of how you see things, it's just part of the color spectrum of what it is and who it is you're interacting with every day. That's a powerful place to be. But I call this out simply because you are in a place of privilege and power already by the fact that this is a very safe space to have this conversation. And I really have high expectations and hopes where that privilege and that safety and that opportunity is going to take your system. We all come from very different experiences and communities and families, and we go back to those communities. And, you know, when we leave our job, and I think Sharon talked about it very clearly, no matter who you are on this call, we have that shared experience of not being able to bring our entire selves to the place of work, which takes up most of our time, most of our energy, and really should be a place where we can let loose our creativity. Our creativity, our intellectual prowess really is born of those experiences. So when we leave so much of ourselves behind, I think we do that with a lot of grief, because we know not only is it about who we are as people, it's also about what we can bring to the job and to the roles that we play in our organization. So just really looking forward to hearing more about this. Thank you. Y'all are so smart in terms of talking about the return rates on your various surveys and really comparing them and talking about, well, return rates tend to correlate with motivation, right? This is an important topic. I want to talk about it. I know in Fresno last year, EDI was a big part of what came up across the board. So, you know, it's just very, very helpful for me to be a part of this discussion and to hear about what you're doing. And with that, I'm going to shut up. So.
No, that was great, Jackie. And you
Thank
know,
you, Jackie.
again, it hasn't been a smooth sailing here either.
Sure.
Yeah. I mean, and Elizabeth can speak to this from her Master Gardener's example. I definitely recall when we very first were pushing volunteers to do things like principles of community and be respectful and et cetera, and not discriminate, et cetera. We got a certain amount of pushback from some Master Gardeners. And it basically was, hey, we're in this for the science. We're here for the science. We're going to push the science. We don't need that touchy-feely stuff, because we were requiring them to take some training, and they didn't want to take the training. But that was about 4 years ago. I mean, we even got some nasty letters. President Napolitano got a couple nasty letters I had to explain to her about it, because they said we were being anti-science, that some folks were. And we finally got them to recognize this isn't about changing the science. This is about making sure you're getting the science into more communities. And once they started looking at it that way, it really kind of started smoothing over fairly quickly. But it was lively for a few months. I mean, we have 20,000 plus volunteers, and they are a very special part of our system in many ways.
Can I jump in real quick? This is Patricia from Alba. Sorry, my camera is not wanting to turn on. It's one of those days. I think it's tired. It's a Friday afternoon. Doesn't want to come on. Anyhow, I just wanted to say, since we're talking diversity, equity, and inclusion, I think one of the things that has been challenging lately for me and for many of my colleagues when I talk to other executive directors is really the multi-generational workforce. And I apologize because I missed the beginning part of the session, so I'm not sure if you guys talked about that, but I think that's been a big lesson learned for me, that people have different expectations, different ways of working now, different needs, and we have to take all of that into account as leaders. And when we're trying to make programs and even I guess set a good work environment that people don't value the same things, and sometimes it seems like with the newer workforce, they aren't as vocal with their needs. At least that's what I've seen with some of my staff that's come on lately, and it's tough to navigate that piece.
Yeah, it's very tough.
It is very, very tough. The multi-generational piece, especially when you're talking about Gen Z. I happen to have 2 Gen Zs in my family. And honestly, what I've learned from them, I will say, is that they are so committed to value. They are committed to a mission. And if they don't see that mission happening in the work that they're doing, they will find somewhere else to go quickly. And they don't have a lot of patience to see how it's going to change over the next couple of years. They want that change to start happening quicker. And they feel that they have shared, at least my sons and their friends have shared, how all of the pieces of climate change, equity and inclusion, science-based knowledge are all interconnected, and that you can't solve one without the other. You can't solve it without health equity and access to food and access to clean air. Like, they know that these are all interconnected, and that the historical implications and foundations for where some of these are coming from, they feel like those need to be addressed clearly and transparently by leadership, is what they've shared with me.
Yeah. Well, we are running out of time. I think this is great. I think thanks to a lot of work by a lot of people, we have made great strides, but lots more to do. And I truly do welcome any input from the PAC on, just ideas, people you think we might want to chat with, articles you think we might want to read. We actually have our senior leadership once a month at lunchtime. We do a discussion about DEI, and it's just us, just about 13, 14 of us. In fact, we had it today at lunch. And we just kind of, it's a, Greg, what do you call it? That safe space? You have some funny term, but it's kind of a safe space where we can just kind of talk our minds and learn from each other.
Yeah, safe space is what I use.
Yeah, and it's really great, and we share articles. And today's topic was whether you actually can be colorblind and or trying to say you're colorblind racist. And there's really some great TED Talks on that, by the way, out there. It's a fascinating topic of people arguing both ways.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Sharon, I'm sure you've probably got most of them on speed dial.
And I just want to thank all of you for your time today and for inviting me into your space. And I look forward to any guidance or research, any guidance or items that you think I should be looking at, resources that you think would be helpful, or people to talk to. So I really appreciate your welcomeness to this conversation today.
Thank you for being here.
Yeah, thank you.
Don't forget, I'm looking forward to seeing everybody in April down at Desert Rec. It's going to be great fun. And I think we have one more of these before then, though, but I don't know what next month's topic is. We will get you the notes out and let you know what next month's topic is.